Welcome to the Butterfly Effect. I'm Chris Horner. This is Amstel Gold 2023. Now today's race at over 200 kilometers, talking about 160 miles and something in the neighborhood of like 33 bergs on today's Amstel Gold course. This was one of my favorite one-day races through the season. Now I love this whole week, Amstel Gold, Flèche, and Liège-Bastogne-Liège. And Liège being my favorite because it seemed to be where everybody had a shot at winning between the GC guys that can climb and the classic guys who stayed around long enough to start Liège-Bastogne-Liège. And of course, then there's riders like Philippe Gilbert, Davide Rebellin. We're talking about Paolo Bettini. All of these riders were fantastic one-day racers, fantastic winning stages and individual stages in the Grand Tours. And then the Grand Tour riders, they have shots at winning like LBL and all that stuff. And of course, here at Amstel Gold too. But we have a great lineup here of hitters when we're talking about Tadej Pogačar being here, the #1 ranked rider in the world, and my favorite up here on the Butterfly Effect. So there's plenty of reasons to tune in at Amstel Gold, and especially when you watch the last 3 editions when we saw Mathieu van der Poel just pull everything back together and smash everybody at the finish. Then there was that win of Wout van Aert over Tom Pidcock that took like 20 minutes, 30 minutes to decide who was going to win that year's edition of Amstel Gold. And then there was last year's race, right? Michael Kwiatkowski, Team Ineos, and then Benoit Cosnefroy coming to the line with Michael Kwiatkowski, Ineos winning that last edition here at Amstel Gold. Every time I'm here, it's fantastic. And the first year when I was here in the 90s with FDJ, when the cars pulled up, you could not open the doors. There were so many spectators. So when we're talking about the 5 monuments, there absolutely should be a 6th, and it's called Amstel Gold in my book. Now, back in the day, there was the World Cup, so Amstel Gold was a super important race. And then a lot of times nowadays, everyone's talking about Strade Bianche being in there as the monument, but I think Amstel Gold goes in before any other one-day race in the world right now. It's the 6th monument. Strade Bianche's up there, put it in maybe 7th, but Amstel Gold is ahead of Strade Bianche in my book. Now, let's get into the racing because when the cameras come on, this is blown up all over the place. First, we're going to see Gianni Vermeersch, the Alpecin de Koenig rider. He's flying through the right-hand turn, and then all of a sudden, we see a massive group come up to him of about 16 riders up to the Alpecin de Koenig rider, and Tadej Pogačar's one of them. One of 16 riders in this front group. We look back when the cameras scan back to the peloton, what you want to call the peloton anyways, it's blown up in pieces and it's starting to try to come back together, but they're about 20 seconds behind that 16 lead group. Now, if you're sitting there listening to the GCN commentators, I got different opinions than they do because they like this move for Tadej Pogačar. I like the move for everybody else in this break of 16. I'm talking about every one of the other 15 guys, but it's the little details that matter, and I'll get to that soon. Now, as we see behind, we start seeing teams chasing back there. Kayak Samsic was chasing, then Bahrain Victorious was chasing. Then this front group of 16, they're going to come up to the Kalberg with about 80 kilometers to go. Tadej Pogačar is going to push the pace a little bit, and we're going to see the Jumbo-Visma rider Tosh van der Sun that was in this front group. He starts coming out the back along with 4 or 5 other riders, and this group's going to go down to 11 riders when we get to the top. Now, before we started the Kalberg, we're talking about FDJ team. They had 3 riders in this front group, and so they had great numbers when you're talking about 16 riders up front to be able to start early attacks. But the problem is, as we came into this Kalberg, the teams were all chasing behind, especially Bahrain Victorious, and Jumbo-Visma were holding back a little bit, always sitting on the wheel there because they had Tosh van der Sun in that front group. After the climb, though, the chemistry starts to change a little bit, and now all of a sudden we're talking about 10 kilometers of chasing from the peloton to this group of 16 that was 16 until the Kalberg started, and this is when things start to switch for me. Now, originally I said I like the 15 riders in this front group, but if the peloton behind keeps chasing like it is, holding them at 20 seconds, 30 seconds, 40 seconds, it means Tadej Pogačar, with every rotation of every rider in this group, he starts becoming the stronger of the riders. And when we're talking about the peloton behind, if you only have to rotate through with 15 riders up there, because you know Tosh van der Sun wasn't rotating through for sure. So if you're only rotating through every 15 rotations, when everybody's taking pulls with Tadej Pogačar, it starts to go in his favor. Now we get to the top of the Karlberg, and like I said, Tadej Pogačar, along with some help from Ineos, kind of blew it up going up the Karlberg here, and then we're talking about a group of 11 riders. FDJ still have 2 riders in this front group, and they're in the form of Lars Vandenberg and Kevin Genietz, so they got 2 guys. Not a crisis, still, you still have good numbers, and it's 11 guys. But at this moment, this break has to start extending and getting some time on the peloton in order to be able to start tacking Tadej Pogačar. Now, one thing happens that I always talk about on the butterfly effect at the top of the Karlberg, and this is when we see Tadej Pogačar get on the radio because he's got some kind of mechanical problem with his bike. See him looking down often, and you see him always radio back to his car, trying to get the car up there, but when the gap is only around 20 to 30 seconds, they can't bring the cars up there. So now we're in a dangerous situation for Tadej Pogačar because his teammates in the back over the Karlberg, Matteo Trentin, we see him give the suffering sign, and he's slicing the throat there, telling us that he's all done while he's sticking his tongue out. That means Tadej Pogačar doesn't have a whole lot of options left in the peloton. Does have more teammates back there, but the racing has been fast and furious, and that was all due to UAE team members, I believe anyways. I'm kind of filling in the gaps, and I'm being told from the commentators at GCN that UAE team members just drilled the race like crazy, and before the cameras came on at 90 kilometers to go, they were the reason why the original break of about 7 riders up there got caught with 105 kilometers to go. And that's why we're seeing chaos. I don't like that tactic either, but I'll get to that at the end of the show. Now, as we know, Tadej Pogačar has some problems up in this front group because he could have a mechanical which could pull him out. If it pulls him out, he's in big time trouble because we saw Matteo Trentin back there already suffering, which means he doesn't have a ton of teammates back there. Now, as the group up front, everybody in this front group, to my disbelief, is rotating through perfectly, with the exception of the Albacete de Koenig rider. Gianni Vermeersch was the only one that I saw sitting on the back. We go back to the peloton with about 50 kilometers to go. Trek Segafredo, when it goes curb to curb, they swarm the front and they take over the front of the peloton as it starts going down this descent. Peloton flies into this right turn, and then there's a massive crash. We'll see from the camera as the first rider at the back's going down that we can see, but really what's happened is riders in front of him are crashing, so he's grabbing as much brake as he can, and because the roads are so slippery up here at Amstel Gold with moisture all over the place, all of a sudden we see 20 riders go down. Dorian Godin, the AG2R rider who won just on Wednesday's race, the Bronze Appeal, he's in the barbed wire fence there, and he's yanking his bike out trying to get it out. We see EF Education. It's Nielsen Palace that went down in this crash, so that'll take out the American rider. And then we see the Albacete de Koenig rider that went down. He's stuck in the middle of the road there, and he's not interested in getting up. We look about as the cameras flip around, looking backwards up the road. We see it's my old teammate Drace Devenens from Soudal Quickstep, and he's telling his mechanic right there, shaking his head, nope, my day's done. 20 riders going down. This affected the peloton massive back there and will change the chemistry throughout the end of the race with 50 kilometers to go. Up front, now we're starting to get into 40 kilometers to go, and this is when Tadej Pogačar can finally get back on the radio, and his team car's coming up behind him. We see the Slovenian throw his leg off the bike. He's grabbing his bottle out to make sure that he's ready to go when his next bike comes. And when we look at the mechanic pulling the bike off the roof, they thought ahead. It has 2 water bottles on there. We see Tadej Pogačar toss his water bottle. He jumps onto his fresh bike, and the mechanic gives him a good push going up the climb. This was money right here, where UAE team members decided to change the bike at the beginning of the climb, not the top, and especially not the flats. And the reason for that is the faster you're going, so on the flat roads, when they're doing 40, 50, 60K an hour, the draft is massive. And so the group of breakaway specialists up there, they have the amount of recovery from sitting on so the speed can stay fast. You always want to change where you're most strongest. And for Tadej Pogačar, that's on this climb. After getting that push, he bridges straight back up to his breakaway companions up front. And we look behind, it was Matteo Trentin and Ada Schelling that were trying to bridge across, as Matteo Trentin dropped Ada Schelling, the Bora Hansgrohe rider, and was just behind there of Tadej Pogačar. But Pogačar is not waiting because he doesn't need any teammates, so he bridges up to this front group. Now we look behind as the peloton was blowing up in pieces. Now we start seeing attacks by there, and it's Soudal Quickstep's Baggioli that's throwing in a dig. He gets this group down to about 6 riders with Thies Benoot there, and they start coming up on the leaders there with Tadej Pogačar. As we hit the next climb shortly after Tadej Pogačar already bridged back up after changing bikes. Now all of a sudden we're on the next climb just 2 kilometers later. Tadej Pogačar is looking over his shoulder. He can see the gap back there is under 10 seconds to that group with Baggioli chasing hard. And, of course, with all the other guys, because Jumbo-Visma, Thies Benoot, he wants up here too, right? So he's going full gas. Now, all of a sudden, Tadej Pogačar's going to hit the afterburners. He accelerates big time. We look there, there's only one guy. It's Tom Pidcock Ineos that can stay with the Slovenian. Over the top, and just before the summit there, it's EF Education who dislodged Lysenko back there in a bridge up to Tadej Pogačar and Tom Pidcock to make 3 guys in the front group. Now behind, 2 guys are chasing Andreas Kron with Alexei Lysenko. Lysenko's a little bit angry with Kron because Kron is fatigued and he's starting to fall apart and the wheels are coming off the bike, but he's still there with some waving of the hand, with some coaxing up there from Astana as they're dropping down the descent. We see they're just 5, 6, 7 seconds behind the 3 leaders in front when they start the next climb. Now, Tom Pidcock is pulling multiple times at the front with Tadej Pogačar, but Ben Healy, EF Education, he's not having any of it, and he's sitting on. Wise man right here from Ben Healy from EF Education, because you don't want to pull with the Slovenian. Now, Tom Pidcock, I don't know what you're doing, but let's go back to your interview that was earlier in the race, because in your interview, you said that you cannot make your tactics around just one rider. Well, when that one rider's Tadej Pogačar and he's in the race, you could absolutely know your first main tactic inside your team meeting has to be, how do we get rid of Tadej Pogačar, and whatever you do, don't pull even with him. But every time the cameras come on, Tom Pidcock is pulling on the front. We see Tadej Pogačar on the next climb. He looks back. He realizes the 2 leaders behind are getting close. So he accelerates a little bit more, and then that's it for Lysenko and for Andreas Kron, the Lotto Soudal rider. The groups behind that were chasing, when we're talking about Thies Benoot's group, he caught the remnants of the break that Tadej Pogačar dropped going up that climb, and now there's 10 guys chasing, but they're about a minute back. Let's go back up to the front leaders, because the very next climb, with about 32, 33 kilometers to go, Tadej Pogačar's had enough of Ben Healy sitting on. He throws in a big acceleration. Ben Healy sprinting out of the saddle. Finally, he sits down. The EF Education rider's legs come off as he blows and opens up the gap. Tom Pidcock is still sprinting, standing up on the pedals, going big time for a little bit longer, about 200 meters maybe, and then Tom Pidcock sits down and his legs blow off too. Tadej Pogačar does another acceleration still on the pedals, and then he'll sit down and he'll ride up over the top of this climb and start going solo, and a massive amount of time gained. Now behind, Tom Pidcock gets caught from EF Education at the summit of this climb, and these 2 riders are going to start trying to work to bring back Tadej Pogačar, but every time we look at the Tadej Pogačar, the Slovenian up front, he is flying up front. Now, all of a sudden, we come into the final lap here at Amstel Gold. Tadej Pogačar, of course, the first across today's finish line with 16 kilometers to go. And he's got a 30 seconds on the 2 chasers behind Ben Healy and Tom Pidcock. We look further back, Lysenko and Kron are still chasing, but they're another 20 seconds, 30 seconds behind those guys. And then it's 2 minutes back there to the group of about 9, 10 riders that are trying to get something together to pull these guys back, but they're not having any luck because they're just losing time all over the place, like water going over the waterfall. It's just dying all over the place, all downhill to the finish. Now all of a sudden we look up front with about 13 kilometers to go, and Ben Healy all of a sudden throws in an attack on Thomas Pidcock. He starts making up some time up front on Tadej Pogačar, whose gap gets down to about 20 seconds. And with 10K to go, we start seeing one of the race official vehicles pull in front of Tadej Pogačar. I don't know what this car was thinking right here. it's in front of the Slovenian for at least a K&a-half and surely giving him some kind of a draft and benefit. Now, do I think it actually altered the race? I don't think Ben Healy's going to catch Tadej Pogačar, but as we see, the gap was dropping down to 20 seconds. Once that car finally disappears, that gap's gone back up to 30, 40 seconds to Ben Healy, and Pogačar will just extend the time even further as he comes into the finish, looks over his shoulder one last time, and the Slovenian will start celebrating all the way into the line with what was nothing less than a dominating victory here at Amstel Gold. Now, Ben Healy across the line, second for EF Education, and when we come into about 500-600 meters to go, we look back there, Thomas Pidcock, oh man, he's got some problems because Lusenko and Andreas Krohn, who has a good amount of speed in his legs still at the finish when we're talking about being able to sprint and do these classic races, they're pulling hard all the way in the finish. We see Andreas Krohn taking a hard pull. Alexei Lusenko takes a pull. And then with about 250 meters to go, Thomas Pidcock knows he needs to throw in a sprint here if he wants a podium at Amstel Gold. He does, and will round out the podium at Amstel Gold with third on the stage. And then behind Andreas Krohn from Lotto Sudal will cross the line for fourth. Fifth on the stage, Alexei Lusenko. And then sixth, Baggioli from Sudal Quickstep will win the sprint back there amongst the big group of favorites that started today's race, but tactically played it all wrong. Now, when we're talking about the tactics for UAE team members, yes, Tadej Pogačar was beautiful and strong throughout the day. It was a magical day, but I never like going into a break of 16 with 90 kilometers to go and then hoping you can hold off 15 other guys that could possibly attack you. When I'm always talking about flat tires and those things, we saw that with Tadej Pogačar where he had an issue. Luckily here at Amstel Gold, you have so many of these short little bergs all over the place. If you can get a car up there in time, you could possibly be able to do it at the bottom where Tadej Pogačar did it, only because he's the best rider in the world. But is he able to do it? Yes. Did he have a little bit of luck? Absolutely, because he said he had a flat tire later in his interview. But it takes a slow flat tire so that he could actually wait to be able to get those cars around. So that's why I never liked this tactic. I prefer, of course, staying around your teammates much longer. They get you into somewhere under that 40, 50 kilometers to go, more like 30 in my book, because you can light anybody up here at Amstel Gold. But Tadej Pogačar wanted to go big. They wanted to make the race hard, and it worked out in his favor because all of the riders behind, when you're talking about Trek Segafredo, Bahrain Victorious, and Jumbo-Visma, yes, they worked together at times, but they just didn't have the chemistry to come together and stay together long enough. At one point in time, when Jumbo-Visma had come to the front over the Kalberg with about 75 kilometers to go, as those guys started chasing, Jumbo-Visma started chasing with three riders on the front. If you look to the left there, Thies Benoot, he's taking a nature break. That was not the time to take a nature break. And I would imagine before he started to take a nature break, like I would have done, you hop on the radio and say, guys, I got to take a nature break, back off just a little bit. And then you're going to give up some time up to those 11 leaders that were in that break with Tadej Pogačar. So tactically, I think everyone thought we could just bring this break back. We can jump across, as we saw different riders like AG2R, Benoit Cosnefroy try to drop everyone on the Kalberg. We saw Thies Benoot try that. We saw Mate Mohoric going on attacks when they got close. And no one was able to close up there to Tadej Pogačar and Tom Pidcock, because both the time when we're talking about Ineos and the Slovenian, every time somebody got close, they just twisted the throttle on the next berg, right? So no one could jump across. When those three teams, Trek Segafredo, Bahrain Victorious, and of course Jumbo-Visma, just needed to work together and close this gap completely. Or the front group, if you wanted to win Amstel Gold, you can't go pull for pull with Tadej Pogačar. And no matter what Tom Pidcock says in his interview, you do have to make your team strategy plans around one rider when that rider's name is Tadej Pogačar, Primož Roglič, Remco Evenepoel, Jonas Vingegaard, and of course, Wout van Aert, right? 5 best riders in the world. You better make your plans around them first and then have a B plan if you can get rid of them. That's my take up here on the butterfly effect. I hope you guys enjoyed today's Amstel Gold Race. If you have time, watch all 90 kilometers because all of it was intense and I left out details all over the place. Make sure you like and subscribe. I'll see you on the next edition real soon.